Here's my review of the Santa Clauses season one. I thought that this show was a ton of fun. I mean, I loved the Santa Claus movies as a kid, but going into the show, I didn't really have that big of expectations because I thought making a spin-off show, a show to movies that came out like in the '90s and then ended in the early 2000s, it just seemed like a weird idea. But I thought that this was a surprisingly really fun time. I mean, Tim Allen has still got it as Santa. I mean, he was great in those movies and he's great here. And the main general plot here is Scott Calvin, aka Santa, is getting a little too old to be Santa and he wants to retire. So, in doing so, he wants to pass it on to. At first, he wants to pass it on to Charlie, of course, his first son, and he denies it. So a lot of this is him trying to find replacements because of that. Because Charlie doesn't want it, so he's got to find a replacement. That is the general plot of this season, is trying to figure out who's going to be the new Santa. Or at least that's like the first plot. Like another plot is him with his new son, who with his new wife, with Principal Newman from Santa Claus 2. Calvin, right over here. That's kind of like the other main plot of him. So we're just kind of seeing Scott train Calvin, as well as a lot of other mini subplots, where at a certain point he notices like there's almost a lesser demand for Christmas spirit. And because of that, how we have like Amazon, we have all these deliveries. So then they say kids do not ask for as much. So then he feels like this business is kind of in trouble. And that's basically because, so this guy named Simon, right? He's in control of this. It's, for the lack of a better argument, it's basically like Amazon, like this drone company. His idea is like he could deliver gifts really fast. And so that's kind of what's threatening Santa Claus's business. So his idea is, what if we make Simon the new Santa Claus? And this is like kind of all in the first 2 or 3 episodes. I think this is a 6 episode show. And that's kind of like the first part of this. And then you kind of know where it's going to go from here. It's almost repeating a plot line from the Santa Claus 2 where we get Simon, right? And then he doesn't really understand how things are going. And then the later half of the show is them trying to fix it. But I mean, I think that Simon, for what's supposed to be a villain character, I mean, he's very charming, actually. I mean, his main idea is like, I mean, it's pretty simplistic. It's literally just like, hey, why do we only have to get this only once a year? If I could take over and use these drones, we can give people gifts whenever they want, and then everyone would be happy. So they really talk about how, and they kind of obviously explains how, I mean, if you'd have it every single day and whenever you want it, it's too much of a good thing, and then Christmas isn't special anymore. And so it's very interesting kind of concept of like, I would say like literally like the main heart of this plot is just too much of a good thing. And I thought that was just really cool to see. And as for the elves, our main like more elves is Betty and Noel. And I mean Betty especially, I think that she's very charming. She's kind of like Scott's right hand man, who what Bernard would have been, or Curtis. And I think that she's really likable here. I mean, any interactions like in the original, a lot of the great interactions were between, Scott and Bernard or Scott and Curtis. And I think she's just as good. I mean, I think that she's a really fun character to be around. And she's kind of here to basically explain how to this new guy saying, hey, if you do this, this is not going to work. This will ruin Christmas. And so you get to spend time, though, with these characters, as well as Noel, who's another elf. And they have like a mini relationship there, and they're very charming. I'd say like they're like, of course, like the main characters, of course, Scott. I mean, then his family with like Charlie's barely in it. We kind of see him because he doesn't want it, and he's not really in the show that much, at least the first season. But I would say these two are basically just as great as characters. I mean, anytime that we're spending with them, they're really fun to be around too. And it's interesting because, I mean, you can kind of see how more and more depressed she's getting across the season as like this guy's kind of ruining Christmas. The Simon's kind of taking the heart away from Christmas, and it's just really interesting. And as for the big man himself, though, I mean Tim Allen, I think he's still great. I think he's still got it. I always loved him in those Santa Claus movies. He's got such a unique version of Santa Claus. Just the way he plays it, especially like I like how in the first one he's kind of more abrasive, and then he kind of grows and changes. And he's very charming. Probably one of my favorite on-screen Santa Clauses. I also like. I'd say he might be my favorite, but yeah, he's still great. He's still got it. And another really touching thing is I think how it just really puts in perspective though how old the original movie is. He returns to the girl who gave him soy milk in the second year that he revisited her. And at first he thinks that that's her mother. And then he realizes, like, whoa, that was 30 years ago. That is her. She's just aged. And I'm like, I thought that was a really sweet moment, though. And they still have that great interaction. And she's still sleeping on the couch for some reason. I don't really know why. I don't really think that was really explained that well. And I think that this show also does a good job of exploring the world. I mean, in the second and third one, we kind of see about the other legendary figures like Sandman, Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, and here we see Krampus, who's it's just really cool to see, really fun. And also, just like in the original movies, I think the elves are just very charming, so they're always fun to be around. And a lot of this is the elves kind of telling this guy, saying, "Hey, you're not doing Christmas right," and they're always in like they're always kind of have that cheerful attitude that just makes them so much fun to be around. As for the CGI, at some points it looks really bad, but at other points it looks pretty good. I mean, for what is a TV show, I think it looks pretty solid. I mean, the reindeer look pretty good. I mean, I think they're above average. And like I said, like Noel is also a really fun character to be around. He's basically Santa's right-hand man. He is the Bernard or the Curtis of this show, I'd say. And he's really fun, especially with his relationship with Betty. It allows for there to be some really fun interactions. And I will say, a lot of this show kind of feels like I binged it in one day, but even then, it feels like sometimes like not enough of it. It feels like it still could have been longer, because a lot of it's like, oh, maybe, like, oh, Simon gets tired, whatever. He kind of quickly ruins Christmas, and then Scott's got to come back and kind of save it, and then like he's kind of convincing him how what he's doing is wrong, and it's kind of all's well that ends well. And I like how in the show we also get to see just more of this world, though. Like, we talk about there's this witch who lives in the North Pole, and there's a bunch of other, like, figures, of course, like we see Krampus. And it's just cool how, like, at certain points, they'll use, like, a witch just to kind of, like, find stuff. And it's just fun, and it adds to the magic of this world. And I thought that was just a lot of fun. I will say, like, I think Sandra and Calvin, I mean, Scott's children, are very charming as well. I mean, whenever they're on screen, I think that it's a lot of fun. It's just cool to see them with the interactions. And with Sandra herself, well, both of them, it's interesting because they almost kind of have like a mini kind of character arc too, as they've grown up in the North Pole. They've never left it. And then eventually they kind of go to the real world and they kind of are nervous. So they get a kind of a cute little character arc as well of them almost kind of breaking out of their shell. So I think that this show does characters really well. I'd say, I mean, just better than I thought it would for what the show is. And we do get to see Bernard comes back. I mean, and it's cool because in this we see how there's all these other Santas and all the previous Santas. And one thing that I don't like that they basically retconned is saying how that Santa in the first one, he didn't actually fall, like he intentionally fell off the roof in order to pass it on to him. And they do kind of make a joke. I'm like, you're really thinking that Santa would be dumb enough to fall off a roof? How many times would that have happened or whatever? Like he would have to intentionally do it. But that does think like you have to think back to the first one. So you're like, why are they all adjusting this guy? I mean, so quickly. I mean, maybe that makes sense because they knew it was going to happen. It just feels weird. It feels like they kind of just made that up out of the fly. But it was still cool to see Bernard again. So, I mean, all in all, I mean, I had a really fun time with this show. I mean, I love the characters. I mean, I just loved seeing Tim Allen as he's just so charming as this character. And seeing the villain have like a cool character arc of at first like he doesn't even really want to be bad. He's just trying to help people. And even though it kind of progressively gets more evil, but then he kind of eventually changes his ways. You can kind of predict it. But it's still a very fun, very solid show to watch, and I thoroughly enjoyed this show. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for something to watch around the holiday seasons, I would highly recommend. So, yeah, this show I think is a lot of fun. If you're in the holiday mood, I would definitely recommend checking this show out. It's on Disney Plus. It's a lot of fun.